But Diaz Ordaz was concerned about Mexico's youth when he addressed the nation the year before the Olympics. In Mexico City, university students had begun to protest. They demanded university reforms, then more. They protested the millions being spent on the Olympics. Some saw U.S. investment as economic imperialism. Others celebrated Che Guevara's revolutionary movement. The presidency, traditionally revered, was vilified. Mexico had never tolerated protests against its political system. In 1968, the beneficiaries of the Mexican miracle questioned the system that created it.
On the one hand, we value the accomplishments in the countryside, in industry, and the impact this had on employment, housing, education. But on the other hand, in politics, we saw there was no democracy. And it was this disparity that we strongly criticized.
The mafia in power controls, as it does today, all the channels of social expression. The unions, the press, the universities. So the students struggled to enable the masses to participate in decision-making.
The movement grew during the summer of 1968. Middle-class sympathizers joined the marches. Mexico City mothers mounted a huge demonstration. The size of the movement became a threat to the government. So did the radical stance of the student leaders.
We represented an option that threatened the survival of the system. We represented a radical alternative to the way things were being done in Mexico.
Our society is a perfect organization? No. There's always room for ideas. Then the students were disappointed with the political development, the economic development, the openness of our doors for foreign capital, in which the profits were going abroad instead of staying in Mexico, and they started something against the government, and it was very serious.
President Diaz Ordaz issued a warning.
We have been tolerant to the point of being criticized, but everything has a limit, and we can no longer... But everything has a limit, and we can no longer allow the law to be broken, as it has been, in the eyes of the world. We have the inescapable duty to prevent the destruction of the essential institutions under which we live and progress.
The warning went unheeded. Violence erupted on the streets when the army took over the university and the Polytechnic Institute. On October 2nd, thousands gathered in the historic Plaza of Three Cultures. It was a week before the Olympics were to open, a month since the president had warned the demonstrators.
We do not want to be in the position of taking measures we do not desire, but we will do what is necessary. Whatever our duty, we will carry it out. However far we must go, we will go.
The troops have moved in and started off as a peaceful demonstration. The students decided they would not march on the Polytechnic Institute that was held by the Army troops. They said it was too dangerous. The army was circling this plaza called the Plaza of the Three Cultures. They were holding a peaceful rally. But now the troops have come and you can hear what it sounds like.
It remains unclear who started the shooting. The army or snipers from buildings surrounding the plaza. Several hundred marchers died. Hundreds more were wounded. Thousands arrested. The day after the massacre, student leader Marcelino Perello visited the university.
On October 3rd in the morning, we went, myself and other fellow students, to the university. It was the usual meeting place. We thought we would either find a great number of people there or no one. As it turned out, it was deserted. Fear had triumphed. They had screwed us.
A week later, the 1968 Summer Games opened on schedule at the university's Olympic Stadium. The president had no regrets.
I am totally at peace with my conscience. I am totally at peace with myself. I await the judgment of history with serenity and confidence. I am not even afraid of my own contemporaries' judgment.
When Mexicans voted for a new president in 1970, an unprecedented 35% of all registered voters abstained. 1968 was the biggest challenge to the political system since its creation. The task of holding it together fell to Diaz Ordaz's hand-picked successor, his Minister of the Interior, the man regarded by many as the villain of 1968, Luis Echeverría.
When I heard that Luis Echeverría had been selected president of the republic, my reaction was one of horror. To think that the person responsible for the massacre of October 2nd in the Plaza of the Three Cultures was going to leave the country. There was no happy ending as in American films. The bad guys won.
And I was afraid that Echeverría, as the Minister of the Interior for Diaz Ordaz, would continue the policies of Diaz Ordaz. So my surprise was very great when I and a group of our friends saw that this did not happen.
President Echeverría surprised many. He surrounded himself with reformers and sought the advice of former critics like Carlos Fuentes.
He established a dialogue with many of the people who had been in opposition, people from the 68 movement, or people who had not participated in the 68 movement, such as myself and many of my friends, who had been critics of the Diaz Ordaz administration, and who were in favor of certain solutions which he seemed to be espousing.
Carlos Fuentes joined the system. He became Echeverría's ambassador to Paris. Echeverría kept Mexico's one-party political system together. He did it by co-opting those he could and suppressing those he could not.
Echeverría manages to weaken the opposition forces. And he does this in the classic way this has always been done by the Mexican government. On the one hand, by being repressive and intolerant. Let us not forget the brutal repression of June 10th, 1971. When many students were murdered in the streets in the first demonstration attempted since 1968. And on the other hand, giving the appearance of being willing to negotiate, of having democratic leanings. But it was only an appearance.
Echeverria also held the system together by attempting economic and social reforms. In his campaign, he met campesinos and saw the face of Mexico's countryside, neglected during the previous 3 decades of industrial progress. Echeverria learned that Mexico could not feed its people, that it had to import basic foods, including corn, that most of the 5 million employed in agriculture earned less than $40 a month. Poverty drove them to the city for jobs which many never found. The rural poor became the urban poor, and Mexico City's slums expanded. Farmers became urban consumers. This meant importing more food. To solve these problems, Echeverria made a commitment to the countryside.
Reitero solemnemente mi compromiso.
I solemnly reiterate my commitment. I will dedicate every day of my term to improving the lives of peasants and conditions in the countryside.
Echeverria's Treasury Secretary was Hugo Margain.
Echeverria opened a new policy, let us say, a correction of an error, to give more importance to the campesinos in general, that we call ejidatarios. And in a way was very welcome that the campesinos had a better position in our own whole society.
To help the campesinos and feed the nation, Echeverria's government paid them a high price for their harvest, then sold it at a low price to consumers. The government absorbed the loss. Echeverria used the power of government to redistribute wealth. His projects were on a grand scale. His Secretary of Agriculture once suggested sunflowers would be more productive than corn. He recommended 20,000 hectares as a start.
And Echeverria said, why 20? Why not make it 40? So he doubled automatically without knowing anything about these sunflowers, without realizing or studying the fact that the peasants and the farmers didn't know anything about it either. And of course the result was they didn't harvest anything. It was sown at the wrong time. By the time they tried to harvest, the seeds had fallen on the ground. But in any case, whether it was a good or bad investment, whenever something was proposed to him, he always said, let's make it twice as much. If 10 is good, let's make it 20. If 100 is good, let's make it 200. It's better. Echeverria at one time stated, we are going to do in 5 years what has not been done in 50. He really thought that you could develop a country by spending a lot of money.
Echeverria made vast investments in public works. He developed poor regions of Mexico like Baja California. Along an undeveloped beach in the Yucatan, he created the resort of Cancun. But all this was costly, and his Treasury Secretary grew concerned.
And I said, well, there are certain rules, Mr. President, that you must take in account. There is a limit of the internal debt and the external debt, and we reached the limit. Then President Echeverria had other opinions of very remarkable people, and he said, I think that now the modern attitude is different. We can take more money from abroad. Why not? Nothing will happen. we are going to be very careful of investments, and then we can pay back easily. Well, I was the school of the different professors and different sectors of the treasury, and it was something very uncomfortable for me. And he was very nice when he said, well, we are friends, you are feeling bad, let me try, and you will go any place that you would like. And I selected to be ambassador in Great Britain. And we continue being good friends.
Jose Lopez Portillo replaced Hugo Margain as Treasury Secretary. Echeverria told him to find more money. Lopez Portillo did as he was told.
That was one of the most important, crucial moments in Mexico's political and economic history. A long tradition of more than 100 years of total independence of the Treasury Department, of the Treasury power, should we say, from the presidential power was broken. Echeverria broke that 100 years of tradition.
After 1973, after he got rid of his Minister of Finance and brought on board very unorthodox economists, he followed a new line of thought in which spending was convenient and necessary, and it should be increased even more. So this was really the beginning of the end of the Mexican miracle.
Echeverria spent lavishly. He nationalized the bankrupt steelworks in Monterrey. By the end of his term, the number of state firms had increased tenfold. In his 6 years, Echeverria held together the political system so shaken after 1968. Students who might have marched in anger were reconciled with the government. Echeverria had given them jobs. His programs had embraced their concerns. But Echeverria left the economy in shambles. Inflation increased. The debt quadrupled. The value of the currency was cut in half. The international banks imposed an austerity program. With the economy in ruins, his campaign promises to the campesinos fell short.
When Luis Echeverria took power, he offered many things to the campesinos, but things did not turn out as promised. He wanted to do many things. He wanted to be like Lázaro Cárdenas, but he did not measure up. He never could be like him. And even as good, maybe things would have changed a little.
In December 1976, Mexico witnessed another peaceful presidential succession. Echeverria chose as his successor his second Treasury Secretary, Jose Lopez Portillo. Saddled with the austerity program, Lopez Portillo sounded a somber note.
We must realize that we are all in the same boat. And we can either make our country a hell or a place where life is good. It is up to us.
The new president rallied his people to face austerity, but he was spared